start to know the ones we try to push away. Yesterday, I mentioned one of the things I work with is irritation, right? And I used to really try to push irritation away. And what I've learned is if I can just make contact with it, and then I can hang out there, then I can actually turn toward it in this inquiry process to start understanding something more about that irritation. So we turn toward ourselves and we turn toward our experience so that we can be in direct relationship with what's happening. And the great promise there of these practices is this also helps us be in great and better relationships with the people in our life, our environment, our world, our communities. But it starts here with us first. You can't really have a better relationship externally with things outside yourself until you start to shift this, how you relate to yourself directly. Now, when we talk about the word inquiry, and others use a word for I of investigate. So you can pick the words that work best for you. Inquiry works better for me, and I'll tell you why in a second. And where I get a little stuck with investigation is I really start to, get a microscope out and magnifying glass, and it has that sort of inspection feeling to me. So it gets me too much up in my head. And what we're going to talk about is inquiry being a whole experience. So often when we say inquiry, and the way we think about it in our culture, we'll think about asking questions. So an inquiry is I'm going to ask you something. But that's only part of what we will practice with inquiry. Certainly we work with our minds, right, and asking questions. Throughout our time together, I pose questions to you and you reflect on those. But we don't want to just have a super heady experience, because really in reality, we know, for me, I spend plenty of time in my head. So what I'm looking for is to notice those things and use the power of the mind to ask questions, but then let those questions really resonate in our body, and then also checking in with our feelings. So we're looking to see with the three fundamental practices around mindfulness of thoughts, which is our mind, mindfulness of our bodies, and mindfulness of our emotions, how we can have a full sense of what's happening for us. So in the body, you'll start to notice there's a place in your body where you experience emotions really very directly. And these sensations in your body happen actually before you'll have language or words for the feelings. So for me, it's in my throat. It's always been in my throat. It hasn't changed since I've been practicing. And as I reflect before I even learned these practices, I experience joy and sorrow and happiness and anxiety and fear. It all comes to my throat. And often when I'm in a sort of say like something that feels sort of anxious and I feel constricted and tight, my throat will constrict. And when I feel joy, I can feel a lot more room in my throat area. Many people feel a lot in their gut area and your stomach area. That's a common place to feel emotions, but you can really feel emotions anywhere. When I'm having a particularly difficult time, I can actually feel tension in the front of my head. That's where your prefrontal cortex is in your brain. And when emotion is taken over, my prefrontal cortex starts working really hard to try to track all the things, and I can literally feel it like constricting up there. So I kind of practice to bring some of that energy away from that constriction so that I can think again really well. So let me just say another thing about our minds. I think this is really important because most of us spend so much time in our minds. A number of years ago, I was studying a organizational change modality in philosophy called appreciative inquiry. And I don't know who said this quote. I've tried to find it many times. I like to give people credit for the things they say, but I don't know who said it, but this is the quote. The questions we ask ourselves are fateful. So I'll say it again. The questions we ask ourselves are fateful. So in that way, the way we shape our questions, our reflection questions to ourselves, they're like a rudder. They're fateful, they're directional, like they will take us in a direction. So it's important to know that the tone and the phrases that we use are something that we should pay a lot of attention to. I'll give you an example. So if I say to myself, oh, I always, and you can fill in the blank for yourself. Or if I say, why can't I get this right? Those questions don't illuminate, they sound very judgmental toward myself. So you can see back to being your own best friend is like, oh, well, wait a second, let me see. I wouldn't actually say that to another person. I just can't even imagine saying, why do you always, right? Unless you're in an argument and you may use that line and be regretful later, but we wouldn't use that as a way to make a connection with another person. We might use it in a moment of confusion, but certainly not one where we're trying to build relationship. So as we're learning to build more relationship with ourselves, reflective questions that don't have that error and quality of judgment are important. And then when you have one that's super judgmental, it's just noticing, oh, well, it's like this right now, and I'm being really super judgmental. And then allow that to be there, taking some breaths, and then seeing what will come up after that. So here's a great place to also remember the puppy analogy, right? If you say, why do you always do this to the puppy? And you do it enough times, the puppy's not going to keep coming back to you when you call it. So it's the same thing, that gentleness. What we're doing here is the what is being aware and focused, and the how is around being gentle with ourselves, being compassionate and caring. So the last point I'll make here around inquiry, and I'm aware of so much I would love to share with you, but with time, we'll just be a brief here. When we think about inquiry, it's less about the questions that we ask ourselves and what happens after the question, which is a process of listening. So back to being your own best friend. You know, like it's when you meet your best friend and they're having a really hard time and you show up at a coffee shop and what does your best friend want to do? They want to tell you all about it. And what we do as being good friends is we listen. But we don't listen as much to ourselves as we do often to other people. So the questions we ask have to be followed with that space, that reflective space, to listen for what comes up. And we're listening with our whole being. We're listening to what's happening in our mind. We're tending to what's happening in our body and our sensations. And we're following what emotions are coming up. So this is an active listening process on all three of those areas. So what I'd like us to do is practice again together. And we're going to do 2 practices today. We'll spend a few moments in sensation, following sensation in our hands, feet, and our seat, our bottom. And then I'll switch us into the questions from La Sarmiento for reflection. So just come into your body now as we transition from sort of using our mind to listen to some learning opportunity and now shifting more internal. And take a comfortable posture, and if it's possible, if you're seated, you place both of your feet flat on the floor and both of your hands, the palms of your hands, resting on your thighs. And draw your attention to your hands resting on your thighs. And work with your mind here to focus your attention there, to feel any sensation just on the bottom of your hands, in your palms. No need to move them around. You can continue to just let them rest. And see what sensations you can pick up on. You may feel some tingling. You may notice some quality of temperature, hot or cold. And your palms may be dry or moist. Bringing your mind back to your hands, hands resting on your thighs. Focusing on the sensations that are there. And now, if you'd like, you can shift your attention to your feet. Asking your mind to focus its attention on your feet. What do you notice there? Feeling sensation in the bottoms of your feet. If you have shoes or socks on, can you feel the sensation of socks around your feet? And you feel the surface the bottoms of your feet are resting on. What's the texture there? It's smooth or rough? And now bring your awareness to your seat, resting on a chair. If you're lying down, the surface that you're lying on. If you're seated, can you actually locate your sit bones, that bony part that rests on the seat? Can you feel those just above and in the tissue that covers them? And are you seated on something fluffy and cushiony or something hard and rigid? How does that feel on your seat, on your bottom? And we'll end this morning with these questions. Right now, am I feeling connected or disconnected? Am I feeling empowered or disempowered? Is my heart open or closed? Am I experiencing suffering or freedom? And as you're ready, you can begin to drop that practice. Coming back into the room, turning your awareness less from the inside, back incorporating the outside. And I'd like to offer this practice for you, again, with your phone today. So yesterday we suggested when you pull the phone up, right, and just kind of see what will soften, right, just a little bit. So today what I'd like you to practice with is pick up your phone and then actually set the phone down with a lot of awareness and intention. And come back to an inner experience of asking yourself any of these questions we've been working with, maybe just one or two, and then pick your phone right back up and do what you were going to do with it. So not making too big of a project on these practices, just incorporating them. I hope to see you again tomorrow as we complete our time together and focus on Nourish. We'll be talking about self-care and self-compassion and the way that works in these practices. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time and attention. Be well, friends. See you tomorrow.
But it takes a little time to heal, I know it now. Hard times come and they go like Colorado rain. So I'm leaving tonight with a point to prove. Only dust in the rearview mirror. I choose to ride under a sky full of stars tonight. Ready to leave my past behind. Ready to open this heart of mine and leave it open wide. I'm ready for the ride. I'm ready to see what I might find. Bring the thunder, the wind, and the rain. Bring the pain. It takes a couple teas, you know, it takes a couple broken hearts to see past the pain to a life built to fall apart. Running scared through the night, only the moon to light my way. Tomorrow's gonna come a little brighter than today. So I'm ready to leave my past behind. Ready to open this heart of mine. Leave it open wide. I'm ready for the ride. I'm ready to see what I might find. Bring the thunder, the wind, and the rain. Bring the pain. Eh, eh.
Welcome to Longmont Startup Week, day 4. We have a very, very exciting lineup this morning. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Integrated Marketing. We're going to start out with a wonderful panel, Garage to Acquisition, with Will Francis, Doug Campbell, and Chris Pearson. And then we're going to move into focusing on creativity in the era of remote work with Achilles Lagrave and Mike Howard. We're going to round out the morning on getting to retirement and surviving it once you're there with Ricardo Cabrera. We are so excited about the lineup today. Thank you so much for joining us. And we could not make this is not possible without some of the incredible sponsors that we also have involved in Longmont Startup Week this year. Our platinum sponsors are ARC Thrift Stores, Avocet Communications, Ward Electric, and Longmont Economic Development Council. Our gold sponsors, thank you, are BizWest, Left Hand Brewing, and Docketly. Connected sponsors include Downtown Longmont and High Plains Bank. And in-kind sponsors, Handprint Inc., Circle Graphics, Sticker Giant, and Chop 5. Again, thank you so much for your dedication to Longmont Startup Week and the entrepreneurial ecosystem that we love so much here. Okay, now we are up for a very, very wonderful morning full of energy with the gentlemen at Rocore and Solid Power. A great, great story here that should be inspirational for all of you. Three of Longmont's most successful and innovative and bold entrepreneurs, Chris Pearson, CEO of Rocore, Will Francis, Chief Products Officer at Rocore, that's a mouthful, and Doug Campbell, who's the former chairman of the board and now CEO of Solid Power, are joining us to tell their stories about the beginning and the recent purchase of the company through Redwire. The trio will discuss how to recognize your strengths and weaknesses, how to scale your business while keeping the talent you have on board, how to manage transition within an ESOP model, the importance of committing to a gutsy sales and marketing approach for fast growth, and how to maintain culture and a team spirit during a buyout. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. Thank you so much. Okay. We're going to start, instead of me reading a lot of words on a paper regarding your bio, we'll just have all of you tell us a little bit about yourself, please. We'll start with you, Will.
Sure, yeah. So Will Francis, currently Vice President of Advanced Programs at Redwire, who came and acquired Rocore back in October of last year. So I basically handle business development at the Rocore business unit, which exists pretty much the same as it did before the acquisition here in Longmont, Colorado. And my background is really on the technical side. So I was a founder of Rocore, one of the co-founders back in 2011, and mostly had a technical role in starting the company, handled kind of the product development side and our offering to the customer and how we could solve their problems and add value and develop products for satellites. Prior to that, my background was in consulting and really structural analysis, structural architecture of satellites. So I'm about 20 years into the industry right now, and the first 10 was technical. Last 10 has been mostly business development.
That's great. Thank you, Doug.
Is that it, Will?
He's got the humor for us today. You guys need to tune into this.
So I'm Doug Campbell. I was previously co-founder, CEO, and board chairman of Rocore. Today, I am the CEO of Solid Power. We're based in Louisville, Colorado. It's a company I co-founded with a couple of professors at the University of Colorado Boulder. And we're working on next generation batteries for electric vehicles.
Last but not least.
So the long one and the short one, I'll be somewhere in the middle. Chris Pearson, I'm now president of Rocore. So I was CEO prior to acquisition by Redwire. My background, I'm about 25 years pure space industry nerd. So I started off in the UK doing a lot of engineering. That was a long time ago. I was lucky enough to move over here in 2004 and set up another startup, which became ABSL here in town, ABSL Space Products, now Enesys. I was lucky enough to be involved with that from the start. It was a lot of fun. Got involved with Rocore through Doug. I was employee number 12. We're now over 100, and we're just keeping on going. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sure is. And there's so much inspiration behind the story. And so many of our viewers today are just wanting to, achieve that same, greatness, quite frankly. You guys have been through it all. You started the business in your garage. We're going to get into that in just a minute. You surrounded yourself with the right people to excel growth, and you sold the business. And that is the true entrepreneurial spirit that really everyone tuning in today wants to be able to be energized by and experience. Will, tell us about the early days.
Sure. Yeah. The early days, we were basically a bunch of consultants. We saw changes coming in the space industry. And there's kind of a common theme with a bunch of the folks that were involved in the early days of Rocore, which was we saw a need for change in the industry and how the space industry worked. And it was a bit of a tumultuous time. You could say that's probably overdoing it a bit, but there was the economic crash of 2008, 2009, where the industry wasn't doing all that hot. So there were a lot of people that were a bit restless, and we saw the opportunity for change in the industry, which allows new things, allows new companies, and we saw the opportunity to build a team. And that's basically what allowed us to get started, was a bunch of smart folks in the Longmont area, Longmont Boulder area here, that were consulting, had a lot of connections, and decided, hey, there's an opportunity here to start a company, and we've got the great start to a team. Mm-hmm. So as opposed to a lot of startup companies, I guess the vision was not based on a particular product or widget or a particular customer even. It was based on, wow, we can put this fantastic team together, and if we can do that, awesome things are going to happen.
And find something to do. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
I'll say really we transitioned from consulting into going after government R&D. Mm-hmm. And really these government R&D opportunities like SBIRs were what allowed us to make that first step and really become a company that could pay salaries and things like that. Those early contracts were mostly those government R&D contracts. So that's kind of what got us started.
And I think recognizing where even some of the holes were and how you could round that out became very, very important. And Doug, your expertise and your ability to see a vision and really catapult it out to the marketplace, enter stage right was a critical move in really growing the business and getting it to the point that you were hiring. Can you comment on that?
Would you like me to comment on that?
Sure. Thank you.
Well, I would say there were really two overarching sort of thesis, if you will, to the founding of Rocore, and that was to Will's point. It was sort of team first, so it was looking at that point in our careers, looking in the rearview mirror and sort of dragnetting all the A players. Eventually, we ran out of A players and had to get into the B team. Just kidding, Kirsten. We love you.
You weren't a part of the top 10. I'm really sorry.
I was busy.
Yeah, exactly. But really, the second sort of premise, if you will, was capital. Mm-hmm. You obviously you need capital. As Will stated before, we were all independent consultants. It's hard to build a business on doing independent consulting because you're being paid to do a job for someone else. And for us, what was in our toolkit was, and Will brought this up, was our ability to get non-dilutive capital out of the federal government. Mm-hmm. And so we leveraged that. We leveraged a program called SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research. And in my opinion, we did right by that program, which was we used it to get ourselves off the ground. We certainly were majority SBIR revenues, I would say 2015, 2016 timeframe, but that quickly switched. And in all fairness, once we brought Pearson in, which was an eye towards getting commercial contracts,
right,
and really moving beyond just doing R&D. And so, I think now today, obviously you guys aren't even SBIR eligible, so we sort of played through the program, and
which is a great
Yep.
place to be in, and something that I think is very, very aspirational for so many of our viewers today. And one of the key points here is recognizing your strengths and your weaknesses throughout, and filling those holes with opportunities. And you mention it, and that's ultimately where Chris came on board as well, was the commercialization. What advice do you have regarding recognizing those strengths and weaknesses?
I mean, when we engaged Pearson, so I knew Chris Pearson from his days at ABSL, because again, we both knew a few things about batteries. But honestly, he didn't know anything about SBIR. He didn't, he was just a commercial aerospace guy. And Will and I, we had dabbled in the space. We'd gotten some contracts, but we were more on the developmental side, and being a product first business, which was absolutely our philosophy. It was bringing in Chris, and it wasn't because we needed help getting government contracts. We could do that in our sleep, but it was going out and getting in, with the defense prime contractors of the world, because that's ultimately how we succeeded as a business.
Right. And Chris, scaling the operations at that stage became something that was paramount. You just don't say we're going to go do this. You have to develop the strategy, the team, the operational excellence, to ultimately get there. Talk us through, you're building infrastructure at the same time. Talk us through some of the scaling of the operations from true R&D to a product delivery.
Yeah, I'm going to just take it back a minute. Actually, I think there's something no one overlook. We'll talk a little bit about 2008, and it took a while for it to kind of shake through into the space industry, but there was a big push round about probably 2013, 2014, for people to do something different in space. And the government lagged behind a little bit. They were waiting to see what the kind of commercial side of space was going to do. But there was some pretty ambitious business plans that came out to people that really were up for taking a bit more risk. So we talked about Elon Musk. He's doing some crazy stuff now with Starlink, internet in the sky. But we basically had an anchor contract, and the timing was just perfect. They needed to do something different to make their business model work. They were prepared to take more risk. And these guys had courted that customer for a while before I came along. We were lucky enough to get selected by them. This was probably it's only about 3 months after I joined. So you talk about kind of strategy for growth and stuff. It doesn't mean anything unless you can actually grow and you've got some money coming in the business. And we just lucked out. That was it was a tumultuous time for the business. It was a very different customer in space that wasn't really ready to execute even at their level. So that required us to kind of learn a whole bunch of stuff. It wasn't just executing on the project. It was protecting yourself kind of commercially as well, was like really key. But I bring that up because the SBIR stuff was great, and it still is great for us, but it's slow. It's very difficult to kind of scale a business with that. With this program, we managed to get a pretty big influx of cash that basically we were brave enough to just pour back into the business and then start to scale. So without money, your plans mean nothing, right? And we didn't have great access to capital. So I don't want to name who that customer was, but if there's anyone out there, thank you, because we wouldn't be here without you.
Yeah.
But yeah, once that got through, I'd say number 1, 2, and 3 in the early days was just talent. We went from, probably 2 of us, maybe 3 or 4 of us that had some experience with space flight programs to needing about 2 dozen.
Yeah.
And we had to persuade these folks that Rocore was actually going to be somewhere stable and was still going to be around in like a few months. So it was all about talent. And then with talent, you could then start around that program, which was a big production effort, we could then start to forge your sort of strategy for growth, operations, infrastructure, all that good stuff that really we could then branch out for all the other customers that came. But that first program, it brought so much, and a lot of it was just brand credibility. To be on that bandwagon at the time, everyone assumed you were smart and not just lucky.
Well, it definitely benefited all of you in a very deep way. And so you now have this big contract, and you now need to be able to fulfill it, and which means you've got to find the talent and acquire them, but you don't have capital, you don't have a lot of money in the bank. What is going through your minds at this stage regarding what is the carrot that we can ultimately hang in front of these people to excite them about coming to work for us?
Yeah, I don't want to take credit for this one, but employee ownership was huge. So I don't know if one of you guys wants to talk
equity.
about it.
So I guess I should say that was the sort of the third leg of the stool, if you will, to the founding of Rocore, was to be a truly employee-owned business so that everyone has skin in the game. Will and I had worked, at other organizations previously where there was no employee ownership. So there was an element when, as an employee, you're sort of recognized that you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and you're sort of like, all I'm getting is a paycheck.
Yeah.
So there's a certain incentive to have skin in the game. And to your point, we didn't have a lot. It's not like we could, pay, in the 90th percentile for salaries and things like that. And so, I'm very proud of the fact that when we exited, everyone who had been around long enough got paid.
Yeah. Well, and you developing that ESOP model, you guys are incredible idea people, but you also know when to surround yourself with the experts internally to help you achieve that goal. How did you structure the ESOP model, and who, knowing that someone needed to help you get there was a key component of seeing the success of it, Will?
Yeah, initially when we were 2, 3, 4 folks, there was kind of primary ownership of the company, and we just divided it up basically in the operating agreement. But then as we started bringing more folks in, I would say, at a high level, the model was stock options for almost every employee. And the goal there was, we didn't know when some kind of value event would happen, when we'd get acquired or something else. We didn't know how much it would be for, what size we'd be at the time, but the target was that folks would basically cash out during an acquisition, or not cash out, but get rewarded as a function of an acquisition. Somewhere around the same order of magnitude as their salary. So that was the hope, and that would be kind of a minimum, and it would be for every employee.
Right.
So that was kind of the model. But and I think that was important, and it would have been hard to get folks, all these A players, as motivated as they were without that, frankly. But there is another element of it there as well, which is just, we can't say enough about the culture of the company, I would say. And just, it is a transparent place. And it was when Doug was there just as much as it is now, where any employee of the company can come talk to any of the executive team, and we'll listen. And we make changes relatively quickly. We respect our folks. So there's this kind of culture where anyone in the team can make a difference in the company, and they see that, they believe that they can make a difference, and they know they can make a difference. So aside from the ownership, just that transparency and access, makes folks know that they're part of the team. And in the startup days, there's no way to get through it other than, sometimes you have to work long nights and weekends. And that kind of gave the folks the reason, the desire to work through those long nights and weekends when it was needed, was not only the ownership, but also the culture side as well. Just being part of a fun, awesome team.
Yeah. It's interesting, culture is so key right now, and it always has been, but I think business today is truly redefining culture and what it means. And it's not about, having the pool table or the ping pong table or the bar that's shaped like a rocket or the coffee machine. Yeah, it does benefit, but it's really walking the walk and talking the talk with upper management so that the team members can really live and breathe the culture that becomes very, very important. How did you systematically, although that's probably a strong word for this topic, but how did you, Doug, I'm going to let you take this because this was, we talked for the first time about 7 years ago, and this was something very, very important to you at the time. You walk the walk and talk the talk. There's no doubt about it when it comes to these sort of things. How did you motivate everyone to feel as though they could come to you and always have that open door policy?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I guess first and foremost, we, myself and Will, had the benefit of seeing how not to do things. So that was helpful. I mean, honestly, it's a recognition that in this business, I mean, you've got highly educated, highly intelligent people. I mean, masters, PhDs. I mean, these are extremely well-educated folks. They're smart. They're not idiots, right? So lack of transparency is not going to do well in that kind of environment because these guys, they figure it out. They figure out what's going on behind the curtain. So you have to, you have to be transparent. You have to demonstrate a degree of humility because, no single person can do it all. And you have to, show folks why they're such a valuable part of the team because they bring a certain unique skill set. And just a recognition that the management team does the best that it can, but it's not perfect.
Right.
And being relatively open. I mean, we had some challenging times, and we were very, very open with the staff. Going through some really lean times financially. Chris brought it up before, but with this one customer, we were quite profitable. But then in the back end of that, business really went down in a big way. We could have laid off half the staff, or we could have just reinvested those profits.
Right.
And frankly speaking, I think we made the right decision.
You sure did.
A couple of years later, Redwire came knocking, and they wouldn't have come knocking if we hadn't, preserved the team. And we just sort of, the staff was very, very aware of what was going on through that entire process.
When you see the right staff, recruiting is on the minds of everyone right now. It is not easy to, number one, find people to actually get a job done. But number two, finding the right people to get the job done is something that was essential to being able to sell an ESOP model, in some situations, a lower salary. You're selling the future that a lot of people can't visualize. When you were recruiting, when you were selling the future, when you were really, giving the song and dance about this is going to really be an incredible company, what sort of things did you look for from a recruiting standpoint for people that had the appetite to fit that?
Yeah, I mean, an environment like Rocore is not for everyone. So this is not a national lab. This is not Lockheed Martin. And so recruiting is essential because you want to filter those folks out. And again, I'm not disparaging national labs or Lockheed Martin or Boeing or anything of that nature. It's
a more nimble,
exactly,
different culture.
There's a good fit for everyone.
Yeah.
But in the recruiting process, obviously we did the best we could. We had a few strikeouts. You're always going to have that. But what you're looking for is a person that is comfortable with gray space, is okay with an ambiguous kind of situation, because in a rapidly growing small business like that, you've got to wear multiple hats. As I jokingly used to say, I was the chief executive officer and the chief toilet scrubber, because it's just kind of the nature of the game.
Yeah.
And so we would do our best to look at folks that seem to have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit and were comfortable. But again, I'm not going to lie, there were some folks that just were not comfortable in that kind of, ambiguous environment.
And I think something that, knowing the company as well as I do, that's very special about that is it wasn't entrepreneurialism from the top down, it was intrapreneurialism from the bottom up as well. And that is a real gift to people, and to be able to have that free spirit in the culture that you built is something very, very important. Branding became, Chris, something incredibly important as well. And certainly we were a part of that with you. And one thing that is very, very important, and I spoke about this on Monday to a bunch of folks, is really the bold approaches that you knew you needed to take with marketing, but the fine line between not alienating or insulting someone's intelligence and motivating an audience at the same time. And you were heavily involved in sales and marketing with the company for quite a while. Talk to us about that innate ability to recognize that you've got to be gutsy in this situation, and the same old thing just isn't going to set you apart when all things are considered at the table.
So there should be a fourth person here, Mark Lake, and he did say he wasn't in, and I saw him in the office this morning, so I don't quite understand why he's not here.
He is in so much trouble.
Yeah, I'm glad I dropped that. In fact, he's probably watching. But yeah, so I think you get a pretty different answer from Mark, but I'll give you my view on it. Yeah, the customer base, the kind of market that we go after is, in some ways, it's pretty peculiar, and in some ways, it's very similar to other small businesses. So the space industry, you think of these big giants like Lockheed and Boeing that Doug was describing. But at the end of the day, there's people. And when you're trying to get a contract, you're trying to get a program, typically there's 2 or 3 people that really matter. Mm-hmm. It's hard to kind of navigate your way through to those champions or those decision makers. But once you're there, it is a really small group you have to influence. So I would actually argue that the branding, the marketing, it raised the profile and it opened the doors. But in terms of this sort of gutsy market and sales and stuff, I actually think it was a lot of the people at Rocore that kind of put their personal relationships, it wasn't about them anymore, it was about the company.
Yeah.
And you have folks that people knew for a couple of decades that were staking their reputation and their success on the relationships they had with some of our employees. So that kind of network, I think Will mentioned at the start, that kind of network was actually probably our secret weapon. But where the branding, I think it had most effect for me, was on the talent. Mm-hmm. The amount of times that people would come and approach us because of the cool website, the cool press release, t-shirt cannons at Small Sack Conference, right? Whatever it was, these things that no one else was doing. It raised that brand awareness. I don't believe that led to sales, but it did wake up some people who were bored, who were in safe jobs in some of these other aerospace businesses, and they're at a point like I was in my career where I was ready for something different, wanting to try something, be part of something growing, and it was special. So I think that was where it really mattered to me. I think we would not have been able to scale up in the way we've done. I mean, Doug said we had some strikeouts, but it was 12 when I joined. It's now over 100, like I say, so that's 90. And I can honestly say, I bet we've lost half a dozen people that were bad hires.
Right.
The rest of them, it was the right time for them. They had another opportunity that was kind of coming, and good luck to them. And they made sure that things were in a good state when they left. But I mean, that's a pretty high success rate.
It's massive.
And it's because a lot of that initial filtering had been done before it got to us. The right people who would be a fit for our culture were applying. So, yeah.
Well, and you bring up an excellent point, because I think all too often people look at marketing as, external only, and the ability for it to build a strong internal audience and become a competitive recruiting tool and differentiate you for something that is really, really exciting. I mean, you guys wanted to be very different in the aerospace community. You set out to do that, and you absolutely delivered it, from the ESOP model to the product that you deliver, to the innovation, the new science, quite frankly, that you're bringing to the table, and finding the right team to make that happen was essential.
Yeah, I was on about the attraction of the talent, but you're right. It actually helped to kind of reinforce that culture, mm-hmm. and people were really proud of it. I mean, the Redwire folks weren't like this, but we've been acquired now well over 7 or 8 months, and you maybe see 2 or 3 Redwire t-shirts in the building. I see 25, 30 Rocore ones. It's like the antique classics that everyone wants to wear. It's got a real good feel about it. people were proud to show the press releases that kind of went out. This campaign was, I think that was on my cap here, was about 2 or 3 years ago at a big conference called Small Sat. I think we took half the company to that conference. We hired out a VRBO there. Everyone was involved, and the 20 people that were at that conference were so pleased to be there. There was an effervescence that kind of spread around about what Rocore was about. So yeah, we definitely punched above our weight with the marketing side, and I think for me it was the culture. It really reinforced it.
I'd like to add, I distinctly remember one morning at that small sat conference, in early morning, being by myself at the booth because everyone was MIA because it was quite the party the night before.
Hey, we'd been working overtime.
Well, ultimately, I mean, it paid great dividends. And we touched about this a second ago, Doug, but I want to go back to it for a second because you've got it nailed. You're building the culture. You've got the great team. You're bringing in the contracts, and the awareness is high. And you need to be able to sustain that. You guys, you've got that entrepreneurial spirit. You want to grow. And all of a sudden, making ends meet is a very, very difficult thing to do. There are personal investments that you've got on the table, and the salaries now outweigh the ability to invest more. Talk us through that time period.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, this was probably going back year and a half, 2 years ago. I think at that point we were 40, 50 people. Access to capital is tough. As I jokingly used to say, our company's line of credit was backed by the collateral of my house and Will Francis's house, and that doesn't scale well. That worked just fine when we were 15 people. But once your payroll starts to exceed, the value of your home on a monthly basis, it's tough. So we had to do a lot of tricky things. And honestly, this is where, Chris got involved a lot because we had to do some really creative things in terms of how we negotiated our contracts, appeal to some of our customers. Hey, we're a small business. So doing things like, upfront payments and stuff like that. But yeah, it got tough. And it was just, we were a victim of our success. We had gotten so large. We were bringing in very large contracts. And typically these kind of contracts are you perform the work and then you get paid. Maybe there's a period of time, but you're sort of at risk sometimes up to 1 to 2 months. And again, when you're a 40 to 50 person company, that can be a lot of capital. So there certainly was a time where we were tapping out our line of credit. We were all writing checks. And I think it was at that point, there was sort of a recognition where I'm not sure if we can sustain this kind of growth with the current access to capital. And that's sort of when the acquisition thing started to come on the radar.
Sure.
Yeah, just going back, I just want to underline one part of that. Actually, I'd never connected these dots before, but that period of time, and it was pretty stressful for everybody involved about 2.5 years ago. And we were living hand to mouth, week by week. I mean, it was week by week. It wasn't just payroll to pay payroll. It was week by week. A lot of our customers helped, but what saved it, basically bridged us to some contracts that we knew were going to deliver some upfront cash, was actually, I won't give the exact proportion, but probably about 20% of the staff literally put their hand in their pockets.
Really?
And it was a mixture of loans. Some people exercised on their options, but I'd never really connected these dots, but that never would have happened without the culture piece.
Absolutely.
That never would have happened without the transparency and the trust. When we went and talked to these folks, not everybody was in a situation where they could help, but everyone who could did.
Yeah.
And that's what got us through.
That loyalty is unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's probably also worth saying there was that tough period where folks were putting their hands in their pockets to keep the company going and avoid layoffs and things like that, which was pretty phenomenal. But interestingly, by the time we actually were acquired, the company was extremely healthy, in a very good cash position. Didn't need to be acquired for any reason. But going through those tough periods just put in our minds this conservatism where we weren't going to grow, extremely fast. We weren't going to risk our cash position because we knew hard times were coming. But that was kind of a common theme throughout the history of the company, I think, is we saw an acquisition as inevitable at some point, but we weren't necessarily trying to build the company up for an acquisition at a certain period of time. Our philosophy was always, if you build a high growth, sustainable company, you're bound to get acquired at some point. I think a lot of folks will say, hey, I want to get acquired in 10 years, and they'll try to line everything up towards an acquisition. But I think a better way to frame your mind is just create a sustainable high growth company. And whether you get acquired or not, you'll be successful. And that was kind of always our model. And yeah, we had some hard times, which made us kind of conservative on the cash side. But by the time we did get acquired, it was a very, very healthy company.
And
I do have one other one. I know I'm hogging it a bit, but in terms of investments and I can't remember the way you put it, but looking at blind spots and where we're weak, we had two absolute key hires that, again, we probably wouldn't have got through that period. Definitely not got through the growth that came afterwards without it, and that was investing in a full-time CFO. She's another local lady, did a fantastic job. And we also had a VP of Ops who came in, because most of the guys on this side of the tech table, we're all wired for business development, for growth, market and sales, but someone's got to get the work done. Really organizing that and getting process in. If we hadn't have done that at the time we did, and that was a big investment for us, there were two big salaries. It would have been very different. I think I said that, but yeah, another she if you didn't catch that.
It's a very good thing. I would agree. What I love about this, though, is it was a gutsy move from this standpoint. Most people would slow down growth. Instead, you decided to find investment so that you could sustain that growth and ultimately, position yourselves for sale. Talk us through getting ready to sell. It is the next big, if you are to sustain this and continue it on the trajectory that you had at the speed in which you were meeting, you needed to bring additional either investment to the table or sell the business.
Yeah, and so first of all, just to be clear, we never took investment. So the checks that were written were loans.
Right.
And again, that was by design. Rocore by design was intended never to take on investment and that sort of thing. And that is in contrast to, Solid Power is an investor-backed company, and it needs to be, because as I like to say, you don't bootstrap a battery company, but you can bootstrap.
Manufacturing is very different.
Yeah, you can bootstrap an aerospace company.
Yeah.
And then I started off on that, and I completely forgot your question.
So it's really ultimately, table talk. You know that you're getting ready to sell. Talk us through some of those conversations, those epiphanies that you're having amongst the senior team during that time period.
Man, it was the financials.
Yeah.
Again, recognizing that we couldn't sustain the growth. To Will's point, when we were acquired, our balance sheet was incredibly healthy. But gosh, with Will and I going all the way back to the founding in 2011, we knew lean times were coming. And it was that coupled with really the market dynamics, which were the market dynamics were incredibly favorable to our business. This whole small satellite, aspect was just booming. And of course, in business, you've got to recognize that opportunities are always a window that's open for a period of time and inevitably will close. So we knew we had to move fast, and recognizing that we'd sort of tapped out what we could get in terms of, again, non-investment, so loans from banks. It was either go out and get an investor, and that's great, that's capital, but certainly there's some pain that comes along with that. Or go find a rich uncle. Yeah.
And Will, at this time, you're also having discussions about stripping ESOP from the team members. Talk us through how you navigated that.
Yeah, at this point, with the acquisition, the nice thing is a lot of folks got, a big check. So that helps a lot for a while, right? But a lot of the staff, was used to the ownership aspect. And that continues to be kind of a driver. Luckily, Well, and I'll take a step back and say they all had stock options in the company. They all felt that ownership. And then when you're acquired by a private equity firm, it's private equity, and there's really very little opportunities to have ownership. And so there were some struggles there. And at that point, what you have to do is not rely on the ownership anymore, right? You have to rely on the culture aspects. You probably have to have an increase in salary and other incentives. However,
Free booze and snacks.
that is a big factor.
A bar.
Yeah, a bar is a big factor. However, we are going public. So that does, bring back the opportunity to have ownership in the company. It's not, having publicly traded stock is not quite the same as stock options in a privately held company, but it has a lot of the same benefits.
Right.
And you do feel like you are an owner in the company at that point. So we're lucky enough, and it's working well for us having that ownership culture. It's working well for us to be acquired by a company that is ultimately going public, because they will have the opportunity to have some ownership in the company.
Chris, so maintaining the team members during this time was very, very important. You still had to deliver contracts, and I'm sure it was important to Redwire as well. How did culture play into maintaining employment during that time period?
I know we're running over, so
We've got 9 more minutes and some
okay.
questions.
I thought there was some
so we're
Q&A.
good.
So, all right, I might ramble a bit
But you
here.
don't have 5 minutes to answer the question.
All right, I'll take 9.
Okay.
No, I'll be. So, yeah, you got to remember, like when it all happened, 2020 it's probably the weirdest year that I'll ever have in my career. There was all sorts of stuff was going on. So we literally came out of this cash crunch at the back end of 2019. As Will was saying, we started to build up a cash reserve. I remember one lunchtime going to the gym. It was like a quiet day. And I said to Will, look, we've had a big crisis. I've got a good 18 months until the next one. And then the pandemic hit about 3 weeks afterwards. So it's probably my fault. But yeah, dealing with the pandemic was just insane. Trying to keep the business going through that was very challenging. And it was more logistical. It's more logistical. The culture was super valuable because there's a lot of trust there. So where there wasn't clear guidance, no disrespect to anyone here locally, but the city, the county, the state, the feds, I mean, there was no clear guidance between them. I mean, everyone was doing the best they could for the first month. You had a lot of scared people. There's pictures coming out of China, like terrified a bunch of folks. But our team was just outstanding. They just pivoted to it really quickly. Yeah, there's a few other personnel issues. We had forest fires, which we all know about. So honestly, by the time we got through to that acquisition, the due diligence was fairly painful. But I go back to the hires we made. The VP of Finance especially was just an absolute force of nature. We were trying our hardest to shield the rest of the company from what was going on, all the myriad of questions that was coming down the pipe. And I'd say she fielded probably 70% of them. The stuff that came up, to our level and stuff was a lot easier. It was a lot more operational. So we managed to keep it from them. The key part for me was getting through the acquisition and people not getting disenfranchised and thinking, okay, the job's done. I'm going to move on. So that's where Redwire actually did a great job. We negotiated hard. We pushed the employee ownership was a big deal, and it was in their interest to kind of take that into account. So yeah, we did actually get retention bonuses for everybody in the business, and that was an eye opener for Redwire because they were expecting retention bonuses for maybe three or four principals to basically make another big soccer dough. But that's not the way we wanted to do it. We wanted to spread it equitably around the company. It was a mixture of a reward, but also people we wanted to invest in to kind of keep around. So yeah, it's not ownership, but that really helped the transition and kind of softened it. I guess the other one was we actually got, it was probably very unusual, we got the acquirer involved in the company even before the deal was done. So because it was the pandemic, they didn't make many site visits, but we had our regular stand-up meeting, and I actually got the CEO of Redwire to come on make an address and talk what Redwire was about. And by the time we got to it, a lot of people were just in tune with the message, and it was like the natural thing for Rocore. If we wanted to carry on growing and go after bigger things, these were the guys to work with. So that thoughtful, slow transition, mixture of transparency, ownership, equity, or equitable kind of redistribution and stuff, we kind of kept to the spirit of that. And honestly, again, the turnover, we lost a couple of people recently, but it hasn't been anything to do with the takeover.
Right.
It's good.
That's fantastic. We've got some questions coming in here I want to get to very quickly. And most of them tie into really the equity distribution itself. How much ownership did you decide that you wanted to distribute to employees at the early stages?
Well, I don't know about the early stages, but I think right before the acquisition, non-executive folks held, I want to say close to half. So it was a chunk.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. What were some of the non-negotiables during the acquisition or pre-acquisition, quite frankly? I assume that you interviewed, or other companies, it was a push-pull, interview sort of approach. But what were some of the non-negotiables that you put on the table that you said, if this doesn't go this way, we're going to put this investment out?
Well, I mean, essentially ensuring there was a cultural fit. Non-negotiables would be, not taking the management team out back and shooting them.
Mm-hmm.
was a key one, preserving the team and seeing how Rocore fit within the broader business model of the acquiring entity. And I think, it was a good fit because philosophically we were in tune. They saw an opportunity where, hey, this middle market of small satellites, not CubeSats and not big giant satellites that Lockheed and Boeing make, but this middle market, and there was a lack of true primes in that area. And that was our business model, that we had identified that as a market need as well. But here was someone with much deeper pockets.
We've got someone asking a question about DEI and how you've you talked about 2 great female hires at very high levels. What have you done to assure that you've got that diversity, equity, and inclusion included in the organization?
Yeah, I can take that one a little bit. So again, I'm not right in the middle of this. This is more Mark Lake's world, who's AWOL today.
But maybe watching.
Yeah, but a lot of the kind of awareness of Rocore when we're going out, when we're trying to recruit, we try and go to some places that are non-traditional. And that's not just DEI from the point of view of gender, race, but it's also from the point of view of just industry. I mentioned what a small world it is, and there's advantages to that. You get to know the people pretty well, reasonably quickly. But on the other side, there's a little bit of groupthink in there. So bringing in people from other industries has been really good for us. Medical especially is a good one for us. Mm-hmm. And then we track that. So that's one of our metrics, and that was even pre-Redwire, but now post-Redwire, that's something that they're tracking. And it's basically making sure that alongside the local community, when you look at the distribution, we're in track with that, and that gives us targets.
Right.
Yeah, to sort of add on to that, this was a topic that many years ago, Mark Lake and I, talked about. Look, Rocore Aerospace Company, traditional STEM field. So guess what? You go out and look for qualified candidates, and by and large, they're going to be male. Mm-hmm. And to Chris's point, you get a bunch of males in the room, and you're going to get a very specific line of thinking, recognizing that you need some diversification. You need to bring in people that are just think differently and problem solve differently. And so recognizing that you do have a smaller population of qualified folks, you've got to be very targeted.
Yeah, you do. And with that, you guys, thank you so much for appearing today. For some of you, it's been a few years that you keep on coming back, and we hope that you will next year too, because really what you have to talk about is so inspirational. And up next, we have got a panel focusing on creativity in the era of remote work. Achilles Lagave and Mike Howard are joining us. Thank you very much. Not yet. There you go.
Thunder's rolling in on a summer night. I can hear a train cry, singing our small town goodbye. Some things won't change, like a sea of red on game day. The simple things built us, the seeds we've sown, the reason we come home. When I die, I hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Wide open roads, the wind won't stop, but at the dawn of road, right here we call a monument. The river like a marching band, soft place to land. Plains like an open hand, they can give and they can take away. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Under a ponderosa pine, thunder's rolling in on a summer night. I can hear a train cry, singing our small town goodbye. Some things won't change, like a sea of red on game day. The simple things built us, the seeds we've sown, the reason we come home. die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Wide open roads, the wind won't stop, but ever don't a road round here we call a monument. The river like a marching band, soft place to land. Plains like an open hand, they can give and they can take away. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky.
Why do chopped salads taste better? Chopped 5 uses fresh from the farm ingredients and chops them into our salads to enhance their natural flavor. Add our delicious roasted chicken breasts and house-made dressings bursting with flavor. Mix everything together and taste why chopped salads are simply better. Come into Chop 5 and enjoy our watermelon chop for only $8.99. Order online at chop5.com and find out how Chop 5 is chopping up fresh flavor and eat with no regrets.
When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Bury my heart in the soil that kept me alive. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old Nebraska sky. Wide open roads, the wind won't stop, but ever don't a road round here we call a monument. The river like a marching band, soft place to land. Plains like an open hand, they can give and they can take away. When I die, hang my soul from a star in that old
They're first generation, but they didn't have it at all. You know, I know. Yeah. Welcome back. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Integrated Marketing, and we are so excited to talk all things creative today. Obviously, a passion of ours. Achilles Lagrave. Yay, third time's a charm, right? Achilles Lagrave of Explanation Point Ventures, and Mike Howard, which is much easier to pronounce, of Daughters and Howard, are joining forces with us today to share their insights into how entrepreneurs and startups can promote and maintain impactful marketing creative in an era of remote work. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I tell you, as I said, I love this topic. Creativity, we're seeing a resurgence in creativity in the world of marketing right now. Digital has changed so much of the landscape because people have the mindset, oh, it will just take you 5 minutes to get that out. Just do it. Just get it out. Just get it out. So I'm really excited not only to talk about how we manage remote workers from a creative standpoint, but really the essence of creativity and its importance today. Before we get there, we'll go ahead and start with you, Mike. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
My journey. My name is Mike Howard. I'm a creative director and a writer, a copywriter. I'm in the advertising industry. Have been for 21 years at this point. I've worked primarily with agencies, Arnold in Boston, Arnold Worldwide, and Crispin Porter McGusky, which is here in Boulder, was here in Boulder until just recently. And I started with them in Miami years and years and years ago. And now I currently am, I guess you can call me a gig employee or freelancer. And I work with lots of agencies all over the country on primarily on just large general market brands, things you would have heard of. I started out on the Truth Anti-Tobacco campaign, which would have been something you would recognize from the early aughts, I suppose. It was a very sort of like lauded, wonderful public service campaign that accomplished some wonderful goals. Volkswagen, Burger King, Target, Starbucks, you name it, lots of different categories, but I've worked on them all.
That's great.
I'm enjoying myself.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Achilles?
Yeah, I'm Achilles Legrave, and I'm currently managing partner at Exclamation Point, which is just a little family office, but spent my career in entrepreneurship and digital transformation and working at the intersection of media, data, and technology, most recently founding Brandsuka down in Boulder, which is a programmatic media buying platform.
Yeah, which we love. So we've got a wide variety of people listening today. Some of them are truly in startup mode. Some of them may be in business for 5 years, and then we've got some people that have just been around a long time and they've got established businesses. And so I want to go get to basics here for a minute, so that we're covering everyone's point of view really on the importance of creative, which is a key point here. What we see with a lot of startup brands is that they feel the product is going to sell itself. And they talk about what it does and how they do it, but they really push the emotional side of marketing aside. And that's where creativity comes into play, right? That emotional epiphany that we create with our audience so that they notice what it is that we're selling. Why do you feel so many startup brands push the need for creative aside when we all, we're creative ambassadors, right? It's what we do day in and day out when we know that there's the importance of it.
Sure, I absolutely can. I think entrepreneurs and business owners, large and small, know that their businesses and their products and services are only as good as the amount of effort and attention that they put into it. So to your point, there's oftentimes an interesting dissonance between the amount of care that an intention that they invest across their business, which sometimes doesn't match within their marketing and creative. And I think that's largely because when we talk about creative, we're talking about a space that's so broad in terms of expertise, skill set, and need. And it's really hard sometimes for business owners who are already wearing every other hat to be able to transact that space successfully.
Right. And just understanding the need for it. You live day in and day out of creating ideas that helps products and solutions and good ideas sell, quite frankly. What advice do you have to the audience today regarding the importance of creative as a part of their strategy?
Well, to your original question, it's funny because it kind of does depend on the startup. I know there's a gentleman that I speak to every now and then back in Boston who has a small agency who worked with startups quite a bit until some point he decided that he would not anymore. And the reason why he wouldn't anymore is, and I think it was maybe like overly aggressive in his part, but he decided that he was basically working for his own competition. And I think in the very best case, I mean, I think when we were working with the gentleman who founded Geek Squad, like his quote, and I'm going to butcher it, is something to the effect of that advertising is the tax you pay for being uncreative as a business person. And I think there's a lot of validity to that. Another sort of anecdote where that's concerned, I worked briefly for a small startup running apparel company that's getting a lot of traction at this point in time. Absolutely no pun intended there. But what was wonderful is the gentleman who started it had such a clear vision for the things that he wanted to do that it was really difficult to get in front of him from a creative perspective. I mean, coming up with run apparel, generally speaking, is more maybe like you're in the fashion industry, so it's a bit more of a creative endeavor to begin with.
Right.
But a lot of the things you'll encounter with, I've encountered anyway with startups, is that they've got so much baked into their idea from the get-go that it's hard to, it would be hard to nudge them out in any regard into another area, or just convince them that those ideas might be wrong-minded in any way. And a lot of times they are right. So I guess I'm giving credit where credit's due to some of the people who start these companies for kind of like having a clear vision for it. Having the vision to pivot at some point in time into what like their realities might be, that's a whole other story.
Right.
And so I guess that's by way of saying too that creative can come, isn't necessarily an advertising endeavor in my mind anyway. But can be part of the product from the very get-go. And that's where I see maybe the biggest importance.
Yeah,
quite frankly.
It's
differentiation.
An interesting point that you're putting your finger on. I had the experience firsthand from the extreme other side of being the entrepreneur early in my entrepreneurial career, of just feeling in my bones that I knew how to market and sell the business. Well, what I learned was I knew how to market and sell the business to me, right? And I was already in the business. So the skill set of actually projecting out that business into your prospective communities and prospective pools of customers was a whole different skill set that I didn't have. So from my logo, I love my logo, and I see this with entrepreneurs and business owners who like develop an identity really early on.
I have my logo tattooed on my arm. Literally, sorry.
You better never change that logo.
No, it's nice because it relates to my family anyway.
Oh, I love it.
Is the name of my company, and I won't not have daughters.
Yeah.
And my last name will not be Howard, and that's maybe a good thing from a creative perspective to take into account, is the longevity there.
I love it.
Design's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
From the get-go.
Yeah, and Achilles, on that point as well. So you're really talking about internal audiences yourself versus your external audience, right? And I think that is one of the lines in the sand where most marketers get it wrong. They're talking about, how it works, and they don't get, again, to the emotional epiphany about what it's going to take to sell the product. And that's where, outside of some of the product development side of things, creativity really comes into play. Mike, talk us through, some of the brands that you've worked with and some of the very established brands. It doesn't matter if it's an entrepreneurial brand, if it's startup, or if it's very established. We have those discussions with our clients every single day. This is more internal culture. We need to focus on the external audience.
Interesting. I'll maybe talk about a case where the two meet.
Good.
So back many, many years ago, I'll say 2005, I was working on the launch of the relaunch of the Volkswagen GTI here in the United States of America.
Fun.
Extremely popular car for Volkswagen, always has been. They had many iterations. This was the Mark V, so it'd be the fifth Mark for them. The first and second were the most popular with their enthusiasts. And what happened was they had a product manager who was an enthusiast himself, and he was really fun and like really animated, extremely geeky. But like, you know, could blip the pedal and stuff like that. It was like that kind of a like driver's driver dude. And when he was talking to us about the thing, like his level of animation when he was talking about things like, I'm forgetting the name of the paddle shifting mechanism, but there was a sort of like rocket boost feature or some baloney like that. But he got so animated that he started swearing in front of all of us. And what was cool was there were details, like every little thing was, you know, it was the cloth on the seats that was a specific kind of plaid that harkened back to the original, like the shifter had like dimples in it like a golf ball, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically you had this guy who was an enthusiast, who was the product manager for a car that was built for enthusiasts. And then we have to come up with sort of like an idea that, well, it could speak to, I guess, anybody really, but the sort of, I think like the kind of creative epiphany, or I hesitate to call it epiphany whatsoever, was just like, if you could appeal to a group of geeks and enthusiasts, then they can go ahead and be their own media. So you can sort of like amplify that media like severalfold, especially for in a situation where like you've got someone who is as enthusiastic about that as like a Trekkie would be about Star Trek. And so what we did was at the time we created a lot of stuff that was like directed very specifically at that particular market of people. We created like a sort of like a collectible figurine doll thing that we called the Fast, and the campaign was called Make Friends with Your Fast. But the doll in and of itself was the type of thing that you would go to at the time it was like Kid Robot, you'd go and like collect that type of thing. But it appealed to the same like level of
It's those trekkers that, you know, that become, you know, that audience for you.
Exactly. So what, I guess to your point, the original question or the original line of questioning was that all the stuff that this gentleman who was the product manager had sort of baked into his like car, because he was an enthusiast, was the same stuff that would appeal to the external group of people that could be their external market.
Yeah, and recognizing that is key. Again, you know, just staying on this dialogue here for a second, audience segmentation becomes something very, very important, and an area that really can become a little bit scientific, quite frankly, when it comes to developing the words and the imagery that is so important to appeal to those audiences. Do you have a specific process that no matter what you're going to go to when it comes to determining what that audience is, so that you know it's the right audience?
That's interesting. First of all, I'm a big data fan. And it's funny that we know each other from, we got to know each other when Achilles was first pitching the Brand Zook idea.
Yeah.
And I didn't know much about data at that point in time, where sort of like ad tech is concerned. And over the years, I've become a real big believer in some strange things that feel sort of, they feel blasphemous to creatives in a way, like just the way communication is structured. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your original question.
Oh, it's just some of the audience segmentation.
Oh, okay. Yeah. A lot of times, to be frank, we're fed that by a strategist or whatever. But I think over the years, and hopefully it doesn't even take that long, is that a creative has a strategic, lots of strategic bones in their body actually, and starts to think about like the realities surrounding like, well, you know, I have a life. I am of a certain age. I have a certain amount of children. I have a wife. We buy things. If I'm paying attention, there should be some like instinct involved in that, but then the instinct moves over to a place like.
No, this is an area it's one of my mainline passions. So I started what feels like ages ago, back in the traditional media days, right? Where audience segmentation and data were really hard to come by.
Yeah.
Now that's been so democratized, and the question is, what do we mean about data, and how does a business owner gain that data on a product that hasn't launched yet.
Mhm.
And that's where technology really comes in, and that's one of the interesting tensions that we played and built into Brainsuka, because the reality is today you can experiment and develop that data at very, very low risk for the business. So one of the things that
use an example, because the examples are really good. Your examples.
Yeah. So one of the things that, for example, we eventually were doing with Crispin Porter was allowing them to develop different ideas in terms of creative and messaging, and actually putting them out into the wild across quite varied audiences at every level: geography, psychography, and demographics, and then just seeing how those were performing,
How they're pulling.
on the way back,
Yeah.
and then that data then informing people like Mike at the creative level as to what were the areas to really lean on.
And
What's
you can't
resonating,
argue
what's not.
as
Yeah.
a creative. You can argue, but you would be arguing with science
Yeah.
and like really good data. It's funny. I work direct to client with Facebook, and I'm working with Google currently quite a bit. But like their level of like the ability that they have, that a Google has, just bounce it. Yeah,
It's
let's
right
try
there.
3 ways.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's do each one, and then we'll do it for a week and see what happens. Which is basically what Achilles does on a micro and macro level, or what Brainsuka did, I suppose. But yeah, their ability to just bounce that off, and it's funny too because it rubs off on you. I don't know why you just try it both ways, which is like again from a creative perspective, once upon a time was blasphemous because you're seeding a certain amount of like creative authority or creative expertise. Which I rolled my eyes when I say that, but we're at a point now where I think if you're not acknowledging that reality of data, then you're just sort of, you have your head in your sand, in the sand from a creative perspective.
Yeah, I agree. And people love good creative. They want to, it's what sparks interest, but it's also what provides them, it could provide them peace of mind. It could provide them a spark of energy. It could be an aha moment for them regarding something new or different. I mean, there's so many psychological reasons why people want to see good creative. But most creative is not good creative. A lot of it just isn't seen. A lot of it just gets pushed aside because it either looks like everything else out there, or it doesn't have that spark that really ignites interest from the viewer or from someone just sitting down reading whatever it might be. What makes good creative good?
That's really funny because we were just talking about that in the green room or whatever before this. It kind of depends on your definitions of good and your definitions of creative, which I stole that from you, like blatantly stole that from you.
It's awesome.
But I think there's it's true. There's efficacy on the good side, and there's watchability on the other side, and it depends what media you're in, and it depends what creative is. And it's funny because the example I sort of just threw to Achilles while we were talking about this was a gajillion years ago when the iPod Nano first came out. Like their commercials, their TV commercials, which were, you can argue whether or not we're beyond that a bit, but it was great because all the good creative was built into the object itself, and that continues to be the case for all Apple products, I think.
Yeah.
And so all you have to do is show it.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is as creative people in advertising, we look at you don't have a Mac. Do you have a MacBook Air? No.
But I do. I mean, we've got all those. Yeah.
So the MacBook Air commercial was the MacBook Air. The original one was the MacBook Air being slid into a manila envelope.
Yeah.
Which is a complete product feature ad. Like there's nothing more in the ad except this is really thin.
Yeah.
It's a really thin computer, and it shows you, it proves how thin it is by demonstrating it. It's a product demo, and I think honestly, that's kind of where, from a personal perspective, I think that's where the sweet spot is, right? Like if you've got a thing that's so good that you can just product demo it.
Well, and that situation, the audience creates their own story.
Exactly.
And they, the product then is magnetic to them, and that's what you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I find also is having a shared understanding on what the key metric defining good, great, or successful is really necessary. I think of the big advertising award shows, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, okay, so you won a Cannes Lion for this video, but did it really perform?
Did it work? Yeah.
Did it actually work?
Yeah.
So to me, good creative is creative that actually performs, and it leads me back to an example. I remember we ran some spots for Truth, and the creatives wanted to validate their creative decisions in the production and final cut of a video, which they loved, and they specifically loved a scene in that video. And when we ran it, we realized that there was a huge drop-off in audience engagement
At that scene.
and we could track it down to that specific scene. And being able to validate through audience reaction that a scene that was beloved by the creative director was not beloved by the entire audience, and being able to address that, I think, are the practices that
I think it's really interesting. Sorry, I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on that. Like, as a creative who's seen sort of the results from some of the things that Achilles and his mechanisms do, from a data perspective, it's really fascinating and humbling, and in a way that you understand being in advertising anyway. But basically, it's. I mean, I'll boil it down to a graph of engagement that will go precipitously down from second one. So, like, we've all experienced this. We see pre-roll advertising on any video. We see the ad before the ad that we're watching online, and basically, like, the engagement metric is something that just goes, the curve goes straight down. Now, degrees of how precipitously that falls, that's success. I mean, like, if you hold out for another, split second or another 2 split seconds, like, those things make a massive difference in, like, whether or not, like, you could draw conversion metrics or I can't even call them really metrics, can I? Like, conversion implications, I guess, from those particular things. That's one thing or another. But again, we're talking about degrees of failure. Like it's almost, you're always going to fail.
Yeah.
It's just the degree to which you do can be less or greater. And then you have to sort of come to terms with that as an ego.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, it's why you better know what you're selling up front too.
Yes. Yes.
It's, we used to refer to this, we had an incredible creative director who started the agency, and he referred to this as creative for creative's sake.
Yes.
At the end of seeing the ad or interacting with it, you have no idea what you're selling. You have no idea what the product is. You have no idea who the company is behind it. And that's when creative does not work. But it makes us feel great because it's a really good idea.
It's
not working.
Funny example where that's concerned. I'll just throw this out there mostly because I don't see ads often. And I think that more and more, like, if you're being really honest with yourself, it's hard to find advertising because we avoid it so actively anyway. But now there's so many ways to avoid it. So one of the things that recently we've been doing during this pandemic is, as a family, we've been watching like Modern Family or like The Office, like, as a family, the entirety of the series. And some of the places where you can find those things have ads built into them. And shout out to all of my friends who do the progressive ads. Great job, because my kids can all recite it now. But it's like the idea is the don't become your dad idea, stuff, which is really, I mean, fantastic and super recallable. Everyone knows it's progressive. Everyone knows what's being sold there. But it's funny, like, I was around during the period of time when they were starting to develop that idea, and it was like, it took many, many years to get it to where it was, and they were trying to sell it in different ways. But the notion underlying it all was that if you are, there's data to support this, that if you have, if your parents have an insurance company, you will tend to, once you get your own insurance company, just get that insurance company because you were on it to begin with, and like, there's all this, like, to push somebody out of, like, their parents' insurance company is a big deal. You look at the idea now, it's got absolutely nothing to do with that. It's just a fun place to start that idea. And literally, I don't know that, like, if you dissect it, there's no way to see what that original idea was, but people all know what's selling,
Well, they do. And, certainly validating that on the bottom, or really we're in charge of top line revenue, right? Validating that, in top line revenue is what it's all about. I want to talk a little bit about when you know you've got a creative concept and you know it's going to work, you know it's going to sell, but the client's just not ready for it. How do you navigate those waters, either to convince them that it's going to work? Certainly A/B testing, you know, some of the things in your wheelhouse can go a great way to do that. But there are a lot of great clients who ruin great creative.
Yeah, you know, to a certain extent, and I attach to that question in a kind of a different way, and that is how many times I've known in my bones and soul that the market was craving something.
That idea.
Something that once you take it out there, the market isn't reacting to in the way that you expected.
And how you come to terms with that.
Yeah, and that really speaks to the necessity to have agility in terms of updating your systems of beliefs to present circumstances as that data comes in. We were talking about an example about the Honda Element.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
That was a great case study and very much aligning with reality. When that car was introduced, I believe in 2004, Honda went out and did a bunch of research, and they found that this car was just going to be an absolute hit with those millennials who had their first professional job and were able to get in that car and go up to the mountains or the beach or Baja California.
And be green about
it. They put it out there and they were not interested. You know, they wanted the GTI and the little fast whip. And who ended up buying the car was 55-year-old
Isn't that crazy?
guys, right?
Yeah.
So
and communication has to change at that point. Lots of things have to change.
Yeah, well, they did a bad job at that, right? They kind of stuck with their creative, believing that their research was going to get them there, and they eventually withdrew the car after some years.
So that, I think, is an example where strategy can fail creative as well. And which is another key point here, because the research is only good if it can truly be validated, and if it's right. And sometimes research gets pushed through a funnel to affirm what you want to believe versus what you should believe. How have you navigated these situations as creatives where you feel some additional research might need to be done to really launch the product or launch the idea with the right information on hand so that you do come up with good concepts?
So I think, first of all, I just to take one half step back is like, I think knowing you're right is, or feeling in your bones you're right, I think is probably is incredibly wrong-minded, certainly for creative, because I think there's a couple things, right? And I've learned this from mentors over the years. This isn't my original thought or whatever, but I think that if you can't think of another creative idea, you are bad creative.
Oh yeah, it should be flowing.
And if like you can't continue to keep thinking of another creative idea, you are an incredibly bad creative. Like it just, and so you've got to sort of like, it's like a challenge. Like, you know, you don't like that idea, I got 20 more of them. That's fine. You know what I mean? That being said, the strategic question you were just talking about, I think in great agency relationships, there is a realization at some point. A lot of them, there was this one, actually, I'll credit it. CMO of Verizon has this great bit. He's from Venezuela, and he does this bit where he'll go through. He's really, really meticulous, and he you know, you have to go through a lot to like make him happy. And eventually, what ends up happening is like you've gone through and tweet according to the strategy to a point where his saying is like it feels like a bad golf swing. Like and he's absolutely right. Like it's like you've overthought, overanalyzed every single piece of it. And by the way, acknowledges his own role in that. Like I have pushed you to over analyze each separate piece of that golf swing to the point that you can't naturally feel the swing anymore, and you're completely shanking it every time. So, and I'm not a golfer, but I think it's a really good point, and speaks to a really good relationship when you can stop for a moment and be like, you know what, we're just not hitting it here, and it's not because of anything you guys are necessarily doing. It's because we've got to go back and rethink what we're trying to say here.
And I love that point, because a lot of clients are just so excited, and we don't want to disappoint, right?
Right.
And you present the big idea or a couple ideas, and when it falls flat, and sometimes it should fall flat. Sometimes we just need to, sell it a little bit more, whatever it might be. That emotionally, as the account team, as the strategist behind it, as a creative director, that can be very, very hard to overcome. What advice do you have for marketers being able to deliver that message? No, it's flat. And for those individuals receiving that message.
I can speak to that from the being the client side.
Yeah.
And one thing that you have to ask yourself, which I learned the hard way, is, am I being a good client? Right?
Yeah.
And to be a good client, you need to have the openness to listen to the hard, unvarnished feedback from the professionals you're engaging with.
Right.
I mean, it's interesting to me how different the framework was for me in being in a doctor's office and having the doctor present me data and scientific background around a complex system that I know I don't fully understand, although I live with it. Whereas in a similar situation with
we're all good at it, right? Everyone's a good creative, right?
Or everybody believes
Everyone's a
they are.
copywriter as well.
Everyone's a copywriter, and that's, I think, fine. We all know English. We all took it in high school or whatever.
Yeah, but so, it's sometimes you just wanna end up engaging in a conversation where you have your own belief structure validated by somebody else, and if that's the relationship that you want, that's going to be a bad relationship, because you're either going to end up with creatives who give up and say, hey, listen, we'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
That's exactly right. I think it's about motivations.
It is.
Like, ultimately, it's about how do you motivate people, and that goes for leaders in the startup space,
does.
and it goes for people as they're having relationships with I guess you'd call us a vendor too,
Well,
or a partner, I suppose.
And the example that you used with Verizon, I think, which prompted the question, is a really good one. There are very, very seasoned, CMOs out there that absolutely believe in the agency. They believe in the creative at the table. They know that they can come up with the idea, and it's not always a home run out of the chute. And then there are people out there that expect the home run out of the chute. Creative is it's a moving organism. You know what I mean? It's constantly evolving and growing, and sometimes becoming its own thing. Good creative. And when you are selecting who you want to work with and who you don't want to work with, I think that's a key component. Are they here to see us win? Or are they here to just move on to the next agency?
Or is one a factor of your relationship, because you can establish that, I think, and again, sort of to your audience in the startup space, like, that's about, look, you can beat someone in submission and they'll still deliver. They'll deliver what you want, or you can get somebody excited about it. And I think, like, it's what's interesting is, like, opportunity is an incredible motivator. Like, we were talking yesterday, there's a great saying about, like, you can get it fast, cheap, or what's the other one? Good, fast, cheap, or good. And you can only choose two. And I think that's the classic equation, or triangle, or whatever. But I think the other thing is, like, opportunity, like, what that buys you from a startup perspective, like, is what is worth its weight in gold in lots of ways. Like, I know as a gig worker, like if I can see very clearly that a project might be an opportunity, my price tag goes down precipitously, like quickly, because like we've got to support ourselves and we've got to do what we've got to do. But at the end of the day, like if a continued sense of relevance and a continued sense of like enthusiasm for what you do, it's like a thank you.
It really is.
It's worth money in the bank. And so I think like establishing, and again, going back to the audience here, just establishing that kind of a relationship where like, yeah, it's your company. Definitely. I mean, there's no like ifs, ands, or buts about it, but like acknowledging the fact that if you like, give a creative a little bit like of rope to run with, you might get magic out of that.
Yeah.
Like that might be an incredible thing. There's, how much did they pay for the Nike logo? I think it was like $30 or something.
Well, I know, it's interesting. The gig economy, you've mentioned it a couple times, and it has changed so much, and how, companies go to market. And whether you are an internal agency, an outside agency, someone in, marketing, tech, or whatever it might be, the need for creative is always there. How you obtain and hire creative is what has really, really changed. Our own creative director lives in South Dakota. And so not only do you not need everyone in the office every day of the week, but a lot of creative is coming out of remote working, whether it be a full-time employee or a gig worker. How did you know that you wanted to really leave quote unquote day-to-day agency life and become, a very sought after gig worker? Those are my words, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet.
I'm very sought after. For me, it's funny. Achilles and I were just having this conversation the other day about like the entrepreneurial instinct that comes from like sort of exhausting what you feel are your choices.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think we both felt it, but it's something that remains unvoiced a lot. It's like, you hear like how I started this with Guy Raz or whatever the name of that podcast is. And it's like, a lot of times you hear people be like, we sat down and we wanted to start a business. And like, we thought about it. And then we thought, let's do kombucha. And it's like, really? That's how you started a business? So like, in my particular case, it was an exhaustion of circumstances. It was one of those things where you kind of look around and you go like, all right, well, I've done this and learned that from these people and in this circumstance. And like, what do I want to do now? And what you want to do now is just like do your own thing kind of. How it applies to our current situation is really great because creativity is so weird and fluid and hard to bill from an hourly perspective because you're always thinking about it all the time.
And moreover, if it takes you an hour to come up with the idea, there's so much more value to it than that, right?
Well, and also too, it never does. And it's like you're on your bike, you're taking a hike, you're thinking about the thing.
It's with you constantly.
Like, so if I were to bill for it, it'd be a 24-hour billing cycle. I mean, like pretty much, except for the hours I sleep. But like my personal schedule, I don't know if this applies to everybody, but my personal schedule during this period of time has become so exotic. I don't know that I could go back to an office life. Like I wake up at 4 a.m. and get like 8 hours of work in before 12. And then I just have fun for the rest of the day, more or less, which is, I mean, fluid and wonderful. You might take a nap, like it just wouldn't be acceptable under any other circumstances, but that is kind of how creative goes. I think I've been hearing a lot of stuff on NPR and stuff about like, it's like that, it's the end result idea. Like, and I'm forgetting the companies right now that they're applying it to, but I love that notion. It's like, I don't care what you are, where you are, what you're doing. If you get that like sort of like metric filled, you've done your job, and however you want to get to that point, that's what you'll be judged upon.
Yeah. I think it's been an amazing experience this past year at every level. But what I've seen opening up for me as I look and gauge what's happening out there is I've had this notion, and you were just speaking to it, about this false narrative, feels false to me, of the differentiation between work and home life balance, right? If I'm an integrated human being,
it's all the same.
It's all the same,
right?
I mean, there's not an Achilles that's different here during quote business hours that is different when he goes home. And I have no on and off switch that I can throw where I'm not going to be thinking about the pressures of home life or work life
in either side.
in either side. Now,
Do you think that's more for creatives though? Because there are teams that definitely want to turn it off when they get home.
Oh yeah, it's awesome.
I mean, it's just just like, no, I'm off.
yeah,
But
I've yet to
and like
actually
business
spend-
ownership, entrepreneurship,
can't
we
imagine.
never turn it off,
I can't
right?
imagine.
Yeah.
I've yet to fully validate that person exists.
Yeah.
I want it to so bad that I dream about that person.
Yeah,
I really do.
I would love to be that person. But what I've experienced
doesn't
over
exist.
the past, what I've experienced over the past year is with these new frameworks and not abilities, because Zoom has been around for a while,
Sure.
but acceptance.
So the uptake is unbelievable. I've been using it for years.
Yeah.
Not Zoom. I've been using some version of FaceTime
yeah.
as a freelancer, as a gig worker since 2013, 14,
Yeah.
and like the unwillingness of people to pick it up. And it's like, you guys, you don't understand. Like, it only takes you a minute to not look at the lens anymore,
Yeah.
like, or to worry about your hair and stuff like that. And after that, it's the best thing you've ever done.
it
But
is.
where I was going with it
Sorry.
is I am getting work product at all sorts of weird hours, right? Like it can be 11:30 and I get the designs in the middle of the night or at 4 o'clock in the morning, etc. And it's open up the availability of those, I believe, of those creatives who are thinking in the middle of the night and have an idea of saying like, "Ooh, I would like to share this right now via Slack," rather than waiting until tomorrow when that thought might have escaped.
And I mean, creatives cannot be forced into the confines of an 8 to 5 job. I mean, it's this madman
It
is
can
way, it's way behind us, right? Because you don't turn it off, and you want them to be thinking, you want to be engaging, and never turn it off. And I think that I mean, we're the same way. I love, that you receive those emails at 11:30 in the evening.
Yeah. A good friend of mine talks about from a creative perspective, and this is, I think, valid. It's a really valid thing. Is how many truly productive creative hours do you get out of yourself or a colleague per day? And we've boiled it down to 4. It's 4 really truly productive with a lot of B word. There's a great John Cleese has it's a very long speech, but if you find it on YouTube, it's about his creative process. And there's all kinds of mechanisms he puts into play. I mean, this is one of the most famous creative people in the whole wide world. And it's you need 90 minutes to get out of mode, and then you need to stay there for an hour and a half, and then and it's absolutely insane. But he boils it down to basically that you can't be productive more than an hour and a half at a time before you got to go walk away, and then you got to sit back and it hurts.
Well, and it's, when you're doing nothing, when you're in the shower, when you're
really
riding
nothing,
the bike, I mean, that's when the epiphanies come to you.
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And that is because you've done all that pre-work, you've relaxed the brain, and now the ideas, it's truly, I think, a phenomenal testament to how the brain works as well.
Now, the other thing about that, though, and I'll add from a client perspective, and especially a startup client perspective, is that a lot of times with startups, because it happens to be in tech, because small startups happen to be tech, you're working with engineers. And engineers, that in my experience, I'm casting sort of broad strokes here, but in my experience, the demand for a regimented process explanation is really high with an engineer. And it's impossible for them to understand what that airy baloney that I just that I just laid on you as being something that's somehow that you can hold on to. And it's I don't know how else to explain it. There are a certain amount of hours in a day, and a day is a really fluid thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, but what's your process? And I'm like, that's my process.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put it. I can give you a menu item of stuff that I do, but you wouldn't be satisfied with that either. And so I think maybe that's a message to the entrepreneurs in your audience, is that it's just it can be more nebulous.
It
I mean,
can
like
be.
you can regiment it, and that's a good disciplined thing to do.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it is
And they've got to
nebulous
allow it
thing.
to happen too.
Yep.
So as people are choosing to hire more remote workers, in some situations, it's the only way we can get the work done, right? What is some advice that you have to them looking for a creative that they might want to do either some freelance work or bring on from a contractual standpoint or hire even,
I'll talk
as
to
an
the hirer.
FTE?
Yeah, I mean, this is the real point of risk, right? Ask yourself, how much do you know about this problem and your ability to triage what the right tool is for the problem you're trying to solve? And if you don't have that, there is huge value to de-risking that equation by going to an integrative agency or such who can actually come in and look and assess what it is you need. I'll give you an example. I was recently working with a consultancy out of Denver, and the founder had a really strong sense, bordering on hubris, on the fact that he'd been hiring engineers his whole life, right? And he could get the right engineer for the right job, and he had brand aspirations that required about 5 or 6 different practices to be filled, which he hoped by contractors. And he kept trying to go out and hire those persons as gig workers. And I remember him calling me very excited one day and saying, "Hey, I found the right person who's going to solve all of these things, because they're a designer and they're a copywriter, and they can also code the website, but they can also assess data coming back from a marketing campaign, and all over the map."
Shotgun.
And I'm thinking, wow. This must be some incredible person, right?
Yeah.
And
that person was, no, I'm joking.
Yeah.
well, yeah, no. Eventually, I jump on an interview of very nice person who presents me her portfolio, and the first thing that she has on there is the Tesla website, right? Now, I happen to have a level of experience beyond what this entrepreneur could framework. And so my immediate question to her was, okay, are you claiming that you were responsible for the entire Tesla website, or are you saying you were attached to the agency that did that? And if so, what was your role, right? Well, she was an intern at the time.
Yeah.
Right? So being able to dig deeper and being able to really rely on your network for folks who have that experience and can help you assess the talent before you make those investments is really, really important.
And I think understanding the difference between the concept and implementation, right?
Yeah.
Because the concept is one thing, the implementation is something else. And are you looking at design or the creative idea? And where there are 5, a creative director and 5 art directors leading the graphic designer down the path they needed to go.
Yep.
That's hard. We've just got a few additional, probably about 30 seconds here, Mike.
Let me give you one thing before, because I want to be very practical for people who might be watching this. Is there's a resource called Working Not Working out there, and it's WNW. I forget exactly. It's Working Not Working. It was a resource created by creatives for creatives and for people who creatively staff. It is also, I think, relatively browsable without a subscription. A lot of times agencies will be required to get a subscription to see it, but you can get an idea of, like, they were all vetted by us by
That's
our
great.
community. So you can get a really good idea of like how legitimate that
Yeah.
resource you're looking at is if they're on there.
Well, I appreciate that deeply, and I know that our audience does as well. Achilles Lagrave and Mike Howard, you guys have been so inspiring today. Thank you very, very much. And up next, how to get to retirement and survive once you're there. This is a big topic for all of you. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Fertile soil, spread my brothers round. I'll be happy.
That was fun. We just
being in the cool
didn't go on.
ground. Going back to where I came from, going away the season's long. Going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. I hope that I survive the hail in July and the storms in the spring. You know, when the winter comes, keep my leaves toward the sun and my roots deep. And if I make it through, I'll be blooming next to you, and we'll be humming with the birds this time next year. But if I'm lost and can't be found, so my memories in the ground, going back to where I came from, going where the corn grows tall, going back to where I came from. Feels like I never left it all. I'm going back to where I came from, going back where I belong, going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. Sun rising through the trees, winter found her end. I'm just a springtime seed tumbling in the wind, tumbling in the wind, tumbling in the wind. Sun rising through the trees, winter found her end. I'm just a springtime seed tumbling in the wind, going back to where I came from, going back where I belong, going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. Till of my fertile soil, spread my brothers round. I'll be a happy bean in the cool ground, going back to where I came from, going away the season's long, going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. storms in spring. You know, when the winter comes, keep my leaves toward the sun and my roots deep. And if I make it through, I'll be blooming next to you, and we'll be humming with the birds this time next year.
Downtown Longmont boasts innovative craft breweries, cideries, and distilleries, nationally recognized restaurants, and one-of-a-kind shops and boutiques, all comprising a Colorado Certified Creative District and a National Historic District. Downtown Longmont is your destination for small-town charm and modern urban vibes. With unique small businesses, tangible history, and Colorado's best craft culture, Downtown Longmont has something for everyone. So come explore downtown, take a stroll, make a memory, and discover what's waiting for you, just around the corner or just inside the door.
Sun rising through the trees, winter found her end. I'm just a springtime seed tumbling in the wind. Going back to where I came from, going back where I belong. Going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. My fertile soil, spread my brothers round. I'll be a happy bean in the cool ground. Going back to where I came from, going where the season's long. Going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. Survive the hail in July and the storms in spring. You know, when the winter comes, keep my leaves toward the sun and my roots deep. And if I make it through, I'll be blooming next to you, and we'll be humming with the birds this time next year. But if I'm lost and can't be found, so my memories in the ground. Going back to where I came from, going where the corn grows tall. Going back to where I came from, feels like I never left it all. To where I came from, going back where I belong. Going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. Sun rising through the trees, winter found her end. I'm just a springtime seed tumbling in the wind. Tumbling in the wind, tumbling in the wind. Sun rising through the trees, winter found her end. I'm just a springtime seed tumbling in the wind, going back to where I came from, going back where I belong, going back to where I came from until the harvest comes. So till of my fertile soil spread.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lori Jones, President and CEO of Avocet Integrated Marketing, and I'm so excited to have Ricardo Cabrera join us right now. Ricardo is a business professional and real estate agent. He focuses on helping with wealth building matters, from assisting people in buying or disposing of their home, their most important asset, to assisting on business matters through the Latino Chamber of Commerce right here in Longmont, and coaching on NAREP 10 disciplines on wealth creation. Ricardo believes in working hard, living on less than what you make, and investing the difference with the ultimate goal of reaching wealth. In this presentation today, we are going to learn about living below your means, saving and investing for retirement, and avoiding debt. Sharing real-life scenarios, Ricardo will illustrate what it takes to create wealth that enables you to arrive prepared and live comfortably during retirement. This is a 60K foot, high-level, easy-to-understand presentation intended to get you thinking, and we're going to do it a little bit differently today. We are going to present in 3 different segments, so start your questions coming immediately about 15 minutes in, 10 minutes in. We'll have a quick break, ask questions, and then continue through the rest of the presentation. Ricardo, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Lori, for having me today, and thank you for Longmont Startup Week. This is my 4th year presenting here, so I'm excited to be back. So let me start by sharing my screen. There's a presentation. This is a financial matters thing, so numbers are important. So let's have a presentation here. And let's see, I'm sharing my screen. Okay, and then I'm going to start by talking about my favorite quote. Let's see, presentation. For what it means, for my favorite definition for happiness. And it reads like this: happiness comes from having the ability to take care of ourselves and our families, to have friends and time to spend with them, and to have the freedom to do what motivates you. This is a guy, Jose Mujica, brilliant man. Look it up on the internet. You'll learn a lot about living frugally from this man. When I read this, I read that happiness is a style and a way of living. It's not a destination, but it's a way of living. I also read and understand that happiness and wealth are relatives. They go hand in hand. They're like second cousins. They're not directly related, but it does help you with your happiness. So today we're going to talk about wealth creation, and I am going to talk and explore 3 of the NAREP 10 disciplines. And those 3 disciplines are to live below your means, to invest in real estate and the stock market, and to know your net worth. I'm going to do this by sharing a set of progressive scenarios in each of the 3 topics that will help you understand and show you what it looks like to reach and survive retirement. My goal here is really to plant seeds, to show you, maybe a paradigm shift, so you can start thinking about this a little differently than you do now. All the examples that I'm going to give here are the numbers we're going to show, and I'm going to talk about here are for example purposes, right? So you're going to have your own situation, you have your own scenario, and that's okay. My goal here is for you to think about these things, go home, do some homework, put some numbers to paper, and come up with your own circumstance and start thinking about your own plan. Let's start with some keywords. Here we go. And in business, we would call these guys the KPIs, right? The key performance indicators. And in our case, for personal finances, we're going to talk about these terms that really are, in essence, the tools and indicators that tell you how you are in the road to your own retirement planning, right? So let me just set up the definitions here, and I'll go in order. So expenses, we all know about those. This is what I consider our standard of living, and this include living expenses like rent and utilities and transportation and food. Then you have your wants, which is maybe you want to go on vacation and go to the movies. And then you have your savings. And yes, you have to plan for those. It's part of your expenses. Set savings aside, and you really don't spend that money, but it's got to be part of your plan. Okay, so investments. Investments in this example today are things that throughout, while you're getting to retirement, is the money you're saving. When you're in retirement, it's going to be your passive income. And these are items like in the stock market, your 401k, your Roth IRA. I put in here Social Security. That's also a pension that you pay for whether you want to or not. Real estate, maybe you buy a second home which you rent. These are all investments. Okay, P&L. P&L is also a business term, profit and loss, and it's no more than the difference of what you make versus what you spend. You get a result. If the number's positive, you have money to save. If the number's negative, well, you're borrowing from somewhere, and we don't want that in this ever. And then your net worth also could be a business term. In the business world, net worth would be the balance sheet of a business, and basically it tells you what you're worth, how much you have altogether. Financial institutions will call this your number, and we all have a number. And we'll explore that a little bit as we go along. So, guys, this is a good time for you to take find a paper, find a pen, take some notes down, and you can start by writing my phone number, write my email address, and a website there, mywealthbeing.com. I have some spreadsheet tools that you can use to explore this topic we're going to talk about today. And then you have my number. Please feel free to call me anytime. I'm available for me to help us and assist on these concepts that we're talking about today. Okay, so to the topic at hand. I'm going to make a couple of assumptions throughout the presentation, and these assumptions go like this. I'm starting work at 25. I am going to retire at 65, and I'm going to die at 95. This is also important when you're planning retirement. So this gives me 40 working years for accumulation. You see that word up there on the screen. That gives you 30 years for living in retirement. This is your distribution. This is when you're spending your money that you saved and invested throughout your accumulation years. And then we have our net worth. There's a whole section about that. And again, these figures are arbitrary and intended as an example. So with that, I am going to start with distribution. And the distribution years are, once you retire, right? So I'm 65, dying at 95. I have 30 years of surviving retirement. And the only goal here is that we get to the end before running out of money, right? Better yet, if you have some extra, then we call that generational wealth. That means that you can leave money for your descendants to help them get started in their retirement or in their life, whatnot. So how do you think about retirement? So you've stopped working, and how do you envision retirement? Here's how I envision it. I would like to be self-sufficient, meaning that I'm not going to have to borrow money from my kids or anybody else so I can survive my retirement. I'd like to have time for my friends and family. Be healthy, of course, because wealth without health is meaningless. That's another one of the NARP 10 principles. And of course, the ability to do what motivates you. That could be, be a golf coach if you like, get a hobby job, go travel, whatever that is. So with that, let's start with the first scenario that I have to share with you. So, and it goes like this. You're 65, dying at 95. Let me see if I can get rid of that top screen over here. That's 30 years. So you have no income. You're not making any money. Your expenses are $30,000 per year. You don't have any money invested. I'm assuming in this slide, in the scenario one, that you're renting the house that you're living in. Your P&L is $30,000 a year, right? So I'm not making anything. I'm spending $30K. My P&L is $30K. I'm also assuming that I have $300,000 saved in the bank. This is my net worth. So simple math calculation. It cost me $30,000 a year to live. I have $300,000 saved. This is going to last me for 10 years. A little bit short of the mark that we're looking for, right? We're looking for 30 years. As we go along, guys, please ask questions, asking often. I'm going to have a break here in a moment, so I will answer the questions that come along. So be patient, and we're almost there. So scenario number 2, I still have no income. I own the house that I live in this case, so my expenses are about half as much, $15,000 a year. I still don't have any investments. My P&L at this point is $15,000, right? That's all it costs me to live. I still have the $300,000, my net worth. And in this case, that money is going to last me for 20 years. We're getting a little closer to our goal, but not there yet. All right, scenario number 3. I am retired, 65, living to 95. I do have a hobby job now. I make $5,000 a year. My expenses are still $15K. So my P&L in this case is $10,000, right? So I'm spending $15K per year. I'm making $5,000 per year. My total bottom line is $10K. At this point, my $300,000 are going to last me for 30 years. So success, this was our goal all along, because that's our retirement years. And we're getting closer to the mark in this case. All right, scenario number 4. I am making $5K with my side job. Cost me $15,000 a year for expenses. In this case, I have some investments. It could be your Social Security income. It could be a pension. Maybe you have an apartment that you rent, and this is bringing you $12,000 per year. Your P&L in this case is now $2,000 per year to the positive side. So now you're not spending money, you're making money every year because your scenario is set up just right. So if you have $300,000 saved in the bank, well, now you're accumulating money. This means that this money is going to last you for a little bit longer, and you may even have some money to leave to your descendants, an inheritance. Maybe you can pay for a wedding for somebody or whatnot. So that is our scenario number 4. All right. So our keywords here again are expenses, income, investments, P&L, and net worth. We're going to see that throughout all the examples. They are the keywords and things that you want to count for all along. Lori, do we have any questions so far?
We do have some. It sounds so basic.
Yes.
But what is wealth?
That's a good question. So let me answer you that question with a story. Or a question with a question. What is the difference between being rich and being wealthy?
We just had this conversation at dinner last night, interestingly enough.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I would like to hear what your definition for or how you see it yourself is. I'll tell you what my story is here, and it's like this. So being rich is just having a lot of money. Anybody can be rich. Being wealthy is having enough money saved that will allow you to keep your standard of living for the rest of your years.
Right.
So if I know that my living standard of living is $15,000 a year, and if I have enough money to maintain that until I die, then I'm wealthy. This really takes on for yourself personally, and it elevates you into a place that is really happiness or stress-free, if you know that you're going to maintain your standard of living forever, it elevates you into a different place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We came to the agreement that wealth just meant less worry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a nice side effect of
Yeah.
knowing that you can live how you like to until you're dead, until you
Right.
expire.
Couple more questions here. Why is 20% the goal for savings?
That's a good question. So we hear this a lot, right? All the experts tell you, you have to save 20% of what you make, and that's a safe number. And I'll tell you why. So whatever your standard of living is, in this example today, we're using $30K per year. If you're saving 20% of that for a certain amount of time, for 20 years or 30 years, you're going to be able to amass the wealth that you need to maintain that same standard of living for your retirement years.
Mm-hmm.
That's why if you have 10%, you may come up a little short. If you have more, well, even better, because then you may retire not at 65, but maybe at 55.
Right.
And that's nice.
Another question here. What is a good go-to ratio for a good financial plan between needs, wants, and savings? You've established 20%
Right.
or more, but where do you plant the other ones?
That's a great question, and thank you for that. So a standard ratio that will allow us to fulfill everything we're talking about today is it's simple. It's a 50, 30, 20. So generally, you're going to spend 50% on your needs, which are, in this case, the expenses. Needs equal standard of living, rent, utilities, transportation, health, all your needs, the things that you need to have in order to survive, food and water. Wants is 30%, right? And then your investments or your savings is 20%. So the ratio is 50, 30, 20. Some people will say, well, how do I do that? I mean, I can't afford that. And the answer is always, yes, you can afford that. What you have to do is do some homework, put a budget together, figure out where your numbers are, and you are going to see yourself and divide between needs and wants where you can become more frugal, right? Maybe you don't go to Europe on a vacation. Maybe you can do a staycation and save enough so your ratios work out. You have to be in the positive. That's an imperative. You can't save if you're upside down, right?
Right. And last question, you touched on this, but what is the relationship between wealth and happiness, and are they related or not?
Well, I could show you my first slide again, and really they are related. They're like second cousins, right? Because I do know a lot of people that have nothing and are uber happy, and conversely, I know people that are rich, but they're not there. They're not happy. So being wealthy, having enough money to survive your good years and bad years, as well as retirement, takes stress away. You mentioned that. It gives you the peace, the personal peace to know that you're okay. I can do what motivates me. Maybe you want to go golfing every other day, and that's fine. Whatever it is.
That's great. I think we're ready to move on.
All right, let's go to the next section. The next section is the accumulation years. So the accumulation years are 40 years. So that means you started working at 25, and then you're working until 65. When you retire, that's 40 years. So our goal in this example today is to get to $300,000. That was the example number that we used at first. That's what in this case we're calling my number. And this should always be in your radar, right? When you're doing your homework, when you're writing numbers down, you should know your radar. I mean, if you do your budget and your monthly expenses are, $5K, and you multiply it by 12, your yearly expenses are $60K, then, that's a good starting number, This still has to balance, and that's up to you to make it happen. So 40 years. So how do you think about working towards retirement? Same answer as before. I want to be self-sufficient, right? I want to have time for friends and family. I want to be healthy, and I do want to have the ability to do what motivates you. In this case, while you're building, maybe you're building a family as well. And then in that case, it could be spend time with your kids, maybe go on vacation. This is all part of the plan. All right, so the slides there are not really showing everything. Yes, they are. They're just a little offline, which is okay. So scenario number one for accumulation years, for the phase of accumulation. You are 25, retirement at 65, that's 40 years. You are just out of college, you have time and money, no more homework. Your first job is making you $24,600. Your living expenses are $25,000. So in this case, your P&L is $2,400 upside down at the end of the year. So you're losing money every year. This means that you are spending $200 per month more than what you're making. Now, there's only one way this can happen, right? And usually it's debt. So credit cards, personal loans, whatever you want to call it. So here's a number for you. If you're borrowing from a credit card $200 per month for 40 years at 15% interest, right? A credit card usually loans you money anywhere between 15 and 28%. So we'll use the bottom number. You're going to have a total debt of over $6 million. Wow. It could be more, but for the example today, and the moral of the story here is don't borrow money, do a budget, make sure at least that you're balancing your numbers so you're not borrowing money, right? It's well known that capitalism, it's a business. I mean, businesses rely on you spending more money, and they don't care if it's more than what you make or not. And they advertise, magazines, TV commercials, they're always convincing you to buy something that you may or may not need. It's a want. And, even worse, if you can't afford it, they'll loan you the money. So that's one of those personal things that we all learn. Everybody learns it at some time in your lifetime. So in this particular example, at 25, this guy still hasn't seen the light. But he does soon, because on my scenario number 2, he's turned 35. Now he's got 30 years to accumulate wealth. In this case, our individual has seen the light. He makes a little bit more, $30,000 a year, and his expenses now match his income, $30,000 a year. His P&L is zero. He's not saving any money. And therefore, if he continues this for 30 years, he's still going to have zero. At least he's not going to be in debt, which is a good step, a better place to be in. But we're still not close to our $300,000 number that we're looking to get to, right? Our accumulation years. All right, scenario number 3. So I'm 35, retiring at 65. I have 60 years to accumulate. I'm still making $30,000 per year, but I was able to make some adjustments in my standard of living on my budget, and now my expenses are $27,600, right? So this means I am saving a total of $2,400 per year. That's $200 per month. If I save and invest this amount of money, $200 per month, for 30 years at 8% interest, this is going to grow to $300,000. Ding, 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 my buddy would say. That's what we're looking to do. Saving $200 a month is not really that hard. I mean, for some people, that's their Starbucks budget. Some people go to the movies and to dinner 4 times, per month. Maybe you could go twice instead of 4 times. There's a lot of ways to get $200 to squeeze $200 out of your budget. So scenario number 3. All right, so scenario number 4 goes like this. I'm still 35, retiring at 65. I'm still making $30K, but now I own my house. My expenses are still the same, $27,600. I do have a side job now, so maybe I bake cookies, or my wife bakes cookies that we sell at Christmas, or maybe I Airbnb a bedroom in my house, or whatever. There's a lot of ways, a lot of side jobs you can do. I'm a golf coach, and they pay me a little bit of money, and that's how I make my side money. I help the community, and I love watching kids grow, so feels good. P&L now grows to $6,000 per year. So that means that I'm making 30K, I'm making 33,600 with my side job. I'm spending 27,600. I am saving $500 per month. And I am saving, therefore, $6,000 per year. In this particular case, that's 20%, a little bit less than 20%. But if I save this amount of money for 30 years at 8% interest, I am going to accumulate $745,000, which is generational wealth. This is more than what I'm going to need with my current standard of living. All right, so again, keywords are expenses, income, P&L, and net worth. I guess, do we have any questions?
We do. One of the big questions is, and there are a few here, how can you make 8% by investing your money?
That's a great question. I get that question a lot because 8% seems like a lot to make year over year, year over year. So let me make a differentiation. Savings and investment are two different things, right? The savings is the money you have left over month by month. So we had $200 in one of the slides here, $500, 20% on another slide. This money, you're going to put it into an instrument, into a vehicle that will allow you to grow your money into something bigger. And it's going to be real estate or the stock market, right? So historically, the stock market has grown to, over the past 100 years, at about 8% to 11% per year, right? Depending who you ask, right? So you also hear, so here's another dichotomy. You hear people of, I bought Google, 30 years ago and now I'm rich. Okay. But the other story is that I bought X company in the stock market and they went bankrupt. Now I'm poor. I lost all my hard-earned money. You don't want to lose money that you've saved because, well, that's the opposite of investing, right? If you go to the stock market, every brokerage house has products designed for the general public. That means if you're not a stock expert and you're not going to do homework every day and figure out where you're going to put your money and take it in and out just in time, well, likely you're going to lose your money. This is like a lottery ticket. They all have products that are specifically designed for people that are not experts. So they have products, for example, retirement products. I'm going to retire in, if it's, where are we now? 2021, in 30 years is 2051. So I can go look for their 2051 retirement product. It may be an ETF, it may be a mutual fund. And these are all words that you can look up, ask the phone, they'll tell you all about it. Ask the phone for ETF, mutual funds, do some research. This is not rocket science, little common sense, and you can educate yourself. That's the best thing you can do to learn about these things. Anyway, if you buy this product, they have professional experts managing these funds to make sure that they invest it appropriately until you retire. And then this money will most likely grow at 8% or higher. Do some homework. It's not really that hard. Real estate, on the other hand, is also an investment vehicle where if you buy the house that you're living in, right, you can buy a house for as little as 3% of the value of the house. And it's an investment because it grows two ways. It grows because the house increases in value every year, and the loan goes down every month that you pay your mortgage. You pay your mortgage, and it's like forced savings. Every time you pay your mortgage, you're paying yourself. You're paying your loan down. And over time, this is going to grow to 8% or more. So it's not hard. The specific reason why I preach, or the NAREB 10 preaches stocks and real estate, is because they are the safest and best ways for you to invest your money. The active word here being the safest.
Right. What are some good options or plans to close the gap if someone has started their retirement plan a little bit later in life?
Yes, well, the strategy of investing is the same whenever you start. I mean, the right time to start investing for retirement is now, whether you're 25 or you're 45. The only difference is that in this case, time is your friend, right? So the concept of compounding and compound growth makes it really easy to start saving, at $200 a month and end up with $745K, right? If you're 45, you may have to start with a little bit more. The unfortunate truth of starting late is that you may have to sacrifice something. Ultimately, you may have to find a way to get maybe not $500 per month surplus or savings. It may be $1,000, right? You may have to work until, not 65, but 68 or 70 or whatnot. The formula numbers are there for you to resolve. So, maybe you don't have 2 cars, maybe you have 1 or whatnot. There's a lot of ways to do it. It's all a personal conversation.